Hey y'all, hey, it's JJ Conway. Welcome to Building Wealth Together, where our goal is to help you walk in abundance and leave a legacy. It's Wealth Building Wednesday, where we answer your money questions with style and grace. But first, before we get to the questions today, we have a little teaching. This is going to probably be the final in our COVID survival series. Now that everybody's going back to work and everybody's starting to go back, I think it's really important to address how we should prioritize our funds right now. And it's kind of awkward. I really was hoping to do this closer to the end of COVID, but now we're in this weird quasi phase where we might be heading back into a COVID issue. And so I'm not 100% sure how we're going to handle that going forward, but I know one thing right now: if you are working, there are some very specific things that we can do. But before I get to the specific things that we do, I first want to get us all on the same playing field when it comes to managing our money. And so what I'm going to do for you tonight is I'm going to do a little bit of a teaching from my course, my free course that you can find at buildingwealthtogether.com. It's called 3 Easy Ways to Win with Money. And it shows you how to start a financial foundation, okay? And so with this class, you can go to buildingwealthtogether.com and you can get into it for free. There's no charge for it, but it's the class that I now require for anyone who wants free coaching. You have to complete this class after our initial consult to determine if we're a good fit. So it used to be in the past, I had people sign a contract that said they wouldn't add any more debt. And then what would happen is I'd get about a month and a half, 2 months into coaching somebody, and they couldn't take it anymore, and they stopped. They just ghosted me because they couldn't handle it. And I said, well, this is not good for me, because I really need you for that 3 months if you want a free coaching package, right? And so then what I started doing was saying, okay, well, if you're going to ghost me anyway, let me at least get something out of this deal. So then I required people to volunteer at my events or help with the hosting and stuff. And so that was something that I started doing. But then with the time of COVID and everything, I realized that it's just not effective. And plus, I'm starting to get clients from all over the country. You know, and before, what I was getting people who were local to me, either in Virginia, where I started, or Louisiana, where we've moved to, right? And so, you know, I could do the volunteer thing, because with the volunteering, I still host events in Virginia, and I still host events in the Arklatex, right? So that and I host events in Texas. So I had all three of those markets that I was building up, and that was cool. But now you have to do that class. And so if somebody was wondering what I'm doing, I'm kind of stalling a little bit, because I'm trying to set up a watch party so that this will display on my page. I was trying to avoid having to tell you that, but Facebook was taking so long. I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm not going to be able to stall that long. And I believe in walking in integrity. All right, so I think we've got that started. It might pop up a little bit, but what we're going to do, and if it does, I'll just mute it. But what we're going to do is talk to you. There it goes. There it goes. What we're going to do is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my class, an excerpt from my class, 3 Easy Ways to Win with Money. So when it comes to managing our money, I really believe that we need to start with step number 1 being to get intentional about where we are and where we want to be. You know, a lot of people, they'll take a class on money management and they will feel convicted, or they go buy a house or a car and they're turned down for a loan, and they do this mad rush and scramble to go get, you know, in a budget and create spreadsheets, and they do all these things that are so complicated that they can't stick with it, right? And then even worse, they drag their spouse along, who's like, who is this person? Where's my person that I married, right? They drag their spouse along and maybe even drag them through the mud. And then the next thing you know, they are having a very rough time of making things work. And because they're having a rough time, then they give up and they just throw in the towel and they go back to their old spending habit ways. And then they dig the hole even deeper. I don't know about you, but I have repeated that cycle many times in my life before I finally got myself straight with money. And, you know, when I used to have no money, I actually thought I was really good with money. I thought I was excellent with money. Well, then I started making some, and then I realized I wasn't really good with money. I just didn't have any to be bad with. Turns out I'm not really a nerd after all. You know, you would think as being a scientist for the military for over 23 years that I would be totally nerding out on spreadsheets and stuff. But that was when I had no money and I had to track every penny. Once I started having something in my pocket, my inner free spirit just came on out, y'all. And so I have had to learn how to be a free spirit and still manage finances in a way that will help my future. And the very, very first step that I recommend people do in order to take charge of their money, to really start winning with money, is to get intentional about what you want. Where do you want to be 6 months from now? Where do you want to be a year from now? Where do you want to be 2 years from now, 5 years from now? And why is it important? For me, you've heard the story. Those of you who've come to any of my business classes, you've heard the story about my big why being my sons. It started off being my firstborn, then the little one came along. But I remember the days after my ex first left. I remember even before our marriage fell apart when he left and I ended up sleeping in this moldy basement 1-bedroom apartment. I couldn't even afford to go buy my son a bed, so I just had a toddler mattress at the foot of my bed, which was really came with the apartment. And that's how we slept, and that's how we lived. And then we were in a hotel, and then sometimes we were homeless. And we weren't homeless for long because I had a good job. But there's nothing like trying to find a place to stay when you don't have a place to stay. You would be amazed at how judgmental and condescending landlords and property managers can be when you need a place to stay tonight. And when I came home from my military trip thinking I could try to fix my marriage, but I found my house was sold and most of my stuff was thrown out and I had no place to live. I had to eat a lot of humble pie. And I saw some of the worst sides of humanity. I will never, ever forget Brooke from the verandas, who took a look at me and said, you know what, I'll give you a chance. And it was way more money than I wanted to spend on housing, but at that point, I just needed a place to stay. And I'm so thankful that I could afford it. There are a lot of service members who have the same story I have, but they didn't have the rank and paycheck that I have. And they live in their car for weeks, months. And they do what they can to get by and stay on friends' couches and things. It's a real problem. And I'm never going to go back to that. The Lord willing, I'm never going to live like that again. And that's why it's important to me to be good with money. You got to find out why it's important for you to be good with money. Maybe you watched your parent die a long death and they didn't have the money they needed. Maybe your grandma didn't have the money she needed to get her health care and to take care of herself in her old age. And you don't want that for you. You don't want that for your children. You don't want that for your wife or your husband. Maybe you grew up in a single mother household where your dad died and he left no insurance and your mom had to work 3 jobs just to make it. I knew a lot of women like that, even in the military, and we have good benefits in the military. So many single moms. I could go down that rabbit hole, but I'm not gonna. Suffice it to say, it's important to me that I'm good with my money. Now, granted, we can't control the future. We don't know what's going to happen, and I'm not going to trust in earthly riches, but I know that I'm going to do my part. And if I ever end up in poverty again, if I ever end up sleeping in Walmart in my car again and finding places to take a shower, which is not always easy to do when you don't have a place to stay, if I ever end up in that situation again, I'm going to know it's the chastisement or the hand of the Lord, and not because it was my fault. All right. So that's my big why, and that's why it's important to me. You got to find out why it's important to you. Now, here's the kicker. Here's the kicker with this whole being intentional thing. I feel like you are not really being intentional until you write it down. So I'm going to encourage you with step 1. Get intentional about what you want and why. and write it down. Write down where you want to be. If 6 months is too soon, write 1 year, 2 year, 5 years. Write it down. Where do you want to be? You know, and dream a little bit. Okay. When you get out to that 5 and 10 year point, dream a little bit. I had a couple on, and I felt so bad for these clients. Like, these were some of my favorite clients, but I don't know what it was about them. They were like the one client that I was never on time for. Like, and I would put things in, I would put alarms into my phone and everything. But I loved them to death. And one of their goals was to buy a house. And the wife would always get frustrated with the husband when he would talk about, I want to buy a house before I'm 50. Or maybe it was 60, I can't remember. But whatever the next big milestone was, he was like, I want to buy a house. And she was like, I don't want to hear about that. We have to get out of debt. And I'm like, well, you do have to get out of debt. And she's like, well, we don't have time to save enough money for a down payment. I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I can teach you how to buy a house with lots of equity already in it without taking on more debt. I can teach you how to do that once we get you out of debt. See, I'm not going to teach you how to do it. Well, anybody can go to my Building Wealth Together classes. You can go to that class and you can learn how to do it. But I'm not going to teach you as a financial planner until you're out of debt, right? But there are ways to make your dreams come true. And they start with you being solid financially. So dream a little bit. Write it down. That's step 1. Okay? Step 2 is what I like to call the reverse spend plan, reverse budget. I call them spend plans because I like to shop and I like to spend money, all right? You wouldn't know that because I'm not a big brand name person, but oh my goodness, I love going shopping. And so I decided to call them spend plans because budget just made me feel like I was being chained up. But spend plan, like that sounded to me like, ooh, I'm going to get to have some fun. And I really do. Even when I was brokered and broke, I had to build in some fun money. Even though back then it was like $2 or $3 a week, it was fun money for me and my son. And you would be amazed when you commit to a debt-free lifestyle, there's so many fun things you can find to do that are free or no cost, or that have discounts. Or if you're nice enough, you can talk people into giving you some discounts, or you can do some work exchange or stuff like that. I've gotten so many discounts and freebies over the years just for publicizing, just for helping out a little bit, just for volunteering, just for, fill in the blank, So don't tell me it can't happen, because when you make that commitment, the doors come open over here and the doors come open over there. So step 2 is to do a reverse spend plan. And what a reverse spend plan is you take your last 2 months of spending and you chart out everything you spent money on, both your paycheck, out of your checking account, and your credit cards, and your store cards, and your Best Buy card, and your Xbox, everything money on for the last 2 months. You chart it out in categories. This month I spent this in all these categories, and last month I spent this in those categories. And when you put that side by side, then you begin to see a pattern with your spending. See, it's really, this is a step a lot of people miss, because what we do is we like, oh, I got to get better with my finances. And we go in and we make this big budget, this big spend plan. And then we realize after a week or two, we've already blown it, right? Because we didn't have a realistic picture of where we are. And if you're pretending you're better off than where you are, then you really can't move forward to where you want to be. And so that's why it's so important to me that we look back at where we are. What have we been doing? I remember after the divorce, strangely enough, after the divorce, my income went way up because I didn't have somebody else spending my money faster than I could earn it, right? So I even though I had been teaching debt-free lifestyle for years, I just stopped paying attention to my money because I had so much, right? That didn't even come out right. I don't even know how to make that sound right, but I had way more money because my ex was spending my paycheck so crazy that I felt like I was just like struck it rich and I didn't have to worry about money. I really should have paid down some debt, but we'll talk about that another time. No, actually, we'll talk about it right now. A lot of the debt that my ex left me with, about 120 of it was consumer debt, and the rest of it was upside down properties, 40,000, 32,000. The biggest one was 225,000 upside down. And all those properties, I didn't care about paying them off. Like, that was not my fault. That was not my job, and it was not my responsibility. And I just wasn't going to bother, right? Because I was going to take care of what I could. And he had made himself the primary on my credit card. Like, I don't even know how you do that. How do you make yourself the primary on a credit card that you had? How do you make yourself a primary on a credit card somebody had before they even knew you? Like, how does that happen, right? Well, he did, so I couldn't close the account. And this was a warning. This is where I realized why it's so important to close those credit card accounts after you get out of debt. Because to me, I'm not in debt. I'm going to get the points. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. It's convenient. I don't want to shop online with my debit card. You know, fill in the blank of all the reasons. Well, I learned a hard lesson that day. Oh my goodness, did I learn a hard lesson. And so I paid down the consumer debt, but I didn't care about the real estate debt because that wasn't my fault and I wasn't going to worry about it, right? It was business debt. Then the Lord got a hold of me. And I realized this money, this $845,000 of debt, is going to hamstring my future if I don't take responsibility for it. And before I came to that revelation, a friend of mine had just become a financial coach, and she begged me, please let me go over your finances with you. And I was like, okay, whatever. You know, I teach this stuff. I don't need you to go over my finances. I was so arrogant. But really what it was is I was hurting. How many times have you made mistakes with money because you've been hurting? And you've been hurting for a long, long time. And sometimes shopping and buying things that you couldn't have, or buying things that you see everybody else have for years and you haven't been able to do that, it just makes you feel so much better for a minute until the bills kick in. Then you feel worse. Then you shop more. You see how this pattern goes? I have been there. And so I went ahead and let her do it. And she's like, you know, you're really good at budgeting, but one thing you're really, really bad at is you don't stop spending. And she said, furthermore, how are you, a holiness preacher who I know isn't buying what most people buy at Victoria's Secret, how are you spending $500 a month at Victoria's Secret instead of paying down that house debt? Look, y'all, Victoria's Secret used to have the nicest clothes. And when you got an hourglass figure and most of the clothes are cut for straight figures with no chest and no hips, I love Victoria's Secret clothing. I wish they would bring it back. Yeah, they had the cutest polos that fit me really well and had plenty of room in the chest and came in at my waist, right? So I was spending lots of money. But what she did was she snapped me out of where I was. She snapped me out of this reverie I was of. I'm finally free of all these negative things in my life. This person spending all my money. This person always telling me how fat and ugly I was. Like, I was finally free of all this. And I was just having fun and living life. And I'm not going to knock you for that if that's the position you're in today. But I look at how much that 2 years, how much money I wasted in that 2 years, and how much more quickly I could have gotten out of debt. In fact, at that time, when I first got divorced, the house that became 220 upside down was only 80 upside down at the time. And she pressured me. She said, you need to unload that house now and just take on a loan for the $80,000 and just pay that off over time. I was like, it'll come up. No. It went down and it went down and it went down and it went down. Which is why I don't believe in investing in real estate with taking on more debt. I really don't. That's why I teach debt-free real estate investing. Okay. So the second step is to really look at where you've been. And if I hadn't sat down with her and looked at what I was doing in the past, I wouldn't have realized that what my future mindset was, not future mindset. Let me see if I can say that better. The mindset of what I thought I was going to do every month. I had it in my mind. I even had it on paper, but I wasn't really doing it. And by looking back over the last 2 months, I realized I wasn't doing it. That's why I want you to do that as step 2. I want you to go back and make your reverse spend plan. And then I want you to be realistic when you do step 3, which is to create a forward spend plan, a regular, normal spend plan. Now, if you don't have a set income every month, like if you're on straight commission, or if part of your income is stable every month and part of it is on commission, so it fluctuates, then there's different ways to handle that. But for most of us, we can create a spend plan where we know how much money we're getting over the next paycheck, whether it's a weekly paycheck or every 2 weeks or once a month, like I get paid. Then we can establish, okay, I'm getting this amount of money for this amount of time, and here's how I'm going to spend it to the next paycheck. Now, you can count all that out and make sure it's zero based. Even if you're like, oh, well, all the rest, I'll just put in the savings. Make sure you give each dollar a name. It's really easy to think intellectually, oh, I'm going to put the rest in the savings. But somehow at the end of the month, we don't have any savings. Anybody else been there? Don't tell me I'm the only one that's ever done that. Anyway, we want to put everything on paper and we want to make it a zero-based budget. Now, for the money that we don't know is going to come in, so maybe you're on commission and this month you might make $100 extra over your base salary, and next month you might make $1,000. In that case, you're going to want to do what's called an irregular spend plan. Or if you have a home business and you never know how much business you're going to do, you're also going to want to make what's called an irregular spend plan. An irregular spend plan is where you prioritize your spending. If you make $500 this month and you know $500 is your rent or your mortgage, your first $500 goes there. Your next $100 goes to water. Your next $100 goes to electric. And you just keep prioritizing. If I get $1 more, here's where it goes. $10 more, here's where it goes. You put in priority order everything you need to spend that's coming up. And as you get the money, you do it. Now, these two strategies of spend plans can help 99% of people. But if you're someone who needs a little extra help in creating your spend plan, or if you've got a very unique situation, I encourage you to go to jjconway.org and book a free 15-minute consult. We will talk about your situation and we will outline a basic plan. And then I'll give you options for engaging me to walk alongside you. I also want to encourage you to go to buildingwealthtogether.com, and you can take a number of free courses on investing, on managing your money, and all kinds of great things. Now, I will caution you, during the time of COVID, we made all of our classes for free. I left the prices on them so you could see the value you're getting. And for those of you who could afford it, I appreciate those of you who continued to pay for courses, even though I offered them for free because you had the means. I appreciate that greatly. My sons appreciate that greatly because they profit share in all of my classes. That's their reward for supporting mommy and having her own business, right? All right, so I've talked a little bit about how to get started. We put everybody on an even baseline of setting your intention by writing it down, no kidding, writing it down, doing your reversed spend plan so you know where you've been, and then doing your forward-looking spend plan so you know where you're going. And remember, the forward-looking spend plan could be a set spend plan if you know exactly how much money you're getting with your next paycheck and for how long in between paychecks. Or it could be an irregular spend plan for that part of your money that you're not sure how much you're going to get in any given month. Now let's talk about how to prioritize your money. The first thing we want to do in prioritizing our money during this time of COVID uncertainty is to save, 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 and then save some more. A lot of people are very surprised when I talk about saving a 3 to 6 month savings plan because unless you were raised understanding this about money, many of us don't generally ever have that much cash on hand. And it's really, really a tough leap to make from having very little savings to having enough to carry your household for 6 to 12 months, okay? I'm in the process of rebuilding my savings following a devastating car accident and a lot of medical bills between me and my son, who my baby was in the first car accident with me, and then I had a separate car accident after that. And so it's just been a lot, and I practice what I preach. I used my savings during that time, and now I'm slowly rebuilding it back up. And that's life, right? That's what it's there for. But I shudder to think what my life would be like if I didn't have that savings on hand. Okay. So what I'm encouraging people to do right now is to save, and then save some more. If you've got a 3 to 6 month savings plan, I'm going to encourage you to really trim down your spend plan and do as much as you can to build that up to 6 to 12 months. We don't know what the future is going to be like with COVID. We thought we were going to get through it. We thought it was going to die down over the summer, but the cases are actually on the rise. We just don't know. And in a time of uncertainty, it's important to save. Now, step 2 that I want you to focus on right now is going to really depend on your financial standing. So I'm going to give 3 cases, acknowledging up front that there is a spectrum of places where people may be, anywhere from you can't pay your bills right now to you are walking in so much abundance it's ridiculous, all right? There's so much of a spectrum in between, but I'm going to give you those 3 cases of people who can't pay your bills, people who have just enough to live, and those who are walking in abundance. And I'm going to define walking in abundance, because people think they're walking in abundance, but they're not. All right. Let's get to that in a second. First of all, if you can't pay your bills, I still want to encourage you to make savings a bill. Like, no kidding, save, even if it's only $25, $50, $100 a month. Put that money into savings, because you don't know what's going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months. And you don't know if you're going to lose your job. You don't know if you're going to bust a tire or a windshield, and you're going to need something to replace it. And with this time of COVID, now is not the time to take on any new debt. I don't like debt in the first place, but this is really not the time to take on debt, because there's so many people getting taken advantage of right now. Okay, so what I'm going to encourage you to do is save a little bitty bit each month and add that into your spend plan. And then I want you to go on what I call a dry bones spend plan. You know how people say we're going to get down to bare bones? See, this is where those bones are so bare, they've done dried out. This is a dry bones spend plan. You are going to cover your 4 walls, which is your housing and utilities, your transportation, your clothing, and your basic food. Basic clothing now, we're not talking about red bottom shoes. We're talking about just enough to get by with, okay? To keep your job, right? And you're going to cover those things for you and your family. You're not covering football camp. You're not covering cheer camp. If Boo Boo wants to go, you're going to have them find a way to earn that money themselves or do some kind of fundraiser or something like that. But right now, you want a dry bone spend plan. You can barely survive as it is. You already don't have enough money coming in to pay your bills. And so then what I'm going to recommend is after you get on your dry bone spend plan, I'm going to recommend that you go on a pro rata plan. Basically, what a pro rata plan is, you are going to reach out to your creditors once a month by mail when you send them a small check, and by phone in the middle of the month or so when you call them to let them know that you're going to be sending a check, but it's going to be small. Okay? In this pro rata letter, you are going to send them your dry bone spend plan. You're going to outline how you really don't have enough money, how you only make $1,000 a month. And by the time you cover your 4 walls and a tiny little $10 a month for savings, all you've got left is like $20 to work with. And you write this letter to all of your creditors. And what you're going to do is you're going to fair share split what they get. So if you only have $20 and you've got 10 equal bills, each one of them is getting $2, and that's just going to have to be all they get. You put the letter in there. The letter shows your dry bone spend plan. The letter shows their fair share of what you have left over to pay debt with or bills with. And this letter also, this is a key point, in addition to the budget, these are key points. The pro rata letter also includes a promise to eventually pay them in full. If you don't promise that you will eventually pay them in full, they're going to think you're scamming them and that you're lying. Because guess what? Everybody and their brother says, I don't have enough money to pay your bill today. And then they turn around and go to Best Buy and buy a brand new TV for the big game. Or they turn around and buy all kinds of gifts that their kids don't need so they can have a quote unquote good Christmas. People lie all the time. You got to show your creditors that you're serious and that you just fell on hard times. All right. Your pro rata plan, again, is going to include
It's going to include you reaching out to your creditors, always reaching out to them, not running away from them. You're going to tell them on the phone. Now you don't have to answer them every single time and let them harass you, because they're going to try and get your money out of you, right? But you're going to call them, make sure they got the last check, make sure they understand that this check isn't going to be much, but you are going to pay them in full. You're going to include your story if it's relevant. If there's a story behind why you can't pay for your bills. And sometimes I just messed up with money. I didn't realize how deep I was getting until I was way over my head. You know, sometimes the most humble stories are the most effective. So you're going to tell your story if that's applicable. You're going to promise to pay. You're going to show your dry bone spend plan so they know you're not lying. And you're going to show them all your other creditors, and you're going to give them a cut. If you need help developing this, you let me know, okay? So this is for people who can't pay their bills. Now, if you have just enough to make it, like you don't have a big abundance every month, but you have a couple dollars left at the end of the month, right? You maybe something to splurge on a little bit from time to time. I still want you to go on a dry bone spend plan. I want you to cut out everything you can other than your four walls. If it's not an obligation, cut it if you can, all right? Then I want you to pay the minimums on your debt. Now, normally I would tell you to get out of debt, but we don't know what's coming down the next 6 to 12 months. We don't know if COVID's going to go away. We don't know if it's going to grow worse. We don't know what the flu is going to do. We just don't know. And since you're just barely making it right now, you can't afford to get caught with your pants down if something turns for the worse. You've got to build up some savings. And the way you're going to build up some savings is by putting yourself on a dry bone spend plan and making sure you only cover the absolute minimum things that need to be covered. And then you're going to sock away as much extra money as you can into savings. Because again, none of us know what's going on. Now, if you're in an industry that is affected by COVID, whether or not you've been affected, I encourage you to reach out to your creditors and see if they have some kind of hardship plan, and let them know that you can barely keep afloat and you're worried that, one month of missed payment is going to totally ruin your relationship with them. And do they have any programs they can offer? A lot of times, if they see that you really are serious about paying them and they see that you're not trying to lie to them, they will actually make very good concessions for you, such as dropping interest rates, dropping fees, sometimes even dropping balances as part of their hardship plan, okay? You want to sock away as much as you can for debt. And even I'm recommending right now 6 to 12 months, and if you can, even more. Well, who would do more? Well, that's the people in my next category. These are the people who have abundance. And when I say you have abundance, what I mean by that is you are out of debt. You are not walking in abundance if all the blessings you give to other people are with debt. And so if you get a paycheck and you barely pay your bills with that paycheck, but then you run up your credit card to be a blessing to your mother, your cousin, your sister, your brother, you are not walking in abundance. You are actually borrowing money and paying interest on that money, which is a penalty to you to be a quote unquote blessing to somebody else. Oh, I feel like that's coming out a lot more mean than I intended to. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not mad at you. I fell into that trap myself. In fact, I fell into that trap so bad because we were doing all of it for the church. And even though I had already gotten out of personal debt once and gotten out of business debt once, I still didn't learn my lesson. I had to get out of this quote unquote church debt. And I had to learn the very hard lesson that if you don't have it to give, then you don't have it to give. Okay? So I'm saying that to say, I want it to be very clear. If you are not out of debt and you don't have a 6-month savings and you're not on track with your retirement or college savings, I'm putting you back into the category of you have just enough. You're not walking in abundance yet, but I can help you get there. Okay? And if you are walking in abundance and all of these categories are met, then I'm going to encourage you to bump up your savings to about 24 months and then start blessing others. Now, of course, as part of an abundance walk, you're already probably blessing others. You know, most people don't get this far without some form of giving. And I find that giving is really the key to staying humble as the Lord blesses you with abundance. Okay? Now, I'm not saying you give to every person who asks for a handout. I personally don't give money to people. I give money to organizations. I support organizations, and I will give of my time. I will teach you how to get out of debt. I will teach you job skills so that you can get a better job or get a job. I will teach you how to start a business, but I'm not going to give you a handout because that to me is enabling. Okay. So I imagine that many people who are walking in abundance are the same way. You either have a monetary giving, a time giving, or some other way that you are tithing back into your community. But what I'm going to ask you to do, and this is just for the greater good, it's going to be also good for you. I'm going to ask you to secure your family's legacy first by bumping up your savings to 24 months. And then I'm going to ask you to start doing an intentional program of blessing others. Okay? All right. Well, that will conclude the part that I want to talk to you about today on prioritizing your money in this fluid, quasi post-COVID time. Okay? Now, I'm saying this is post-COVID, even though it seems to be resurfacing in a lot of areas. But these are still the principles you are going to use once COVID is over. Because again, once they declare victory, we really don't know what else is going to happen. We don't know if it's going to be a true victory. We don't know if it's a temporary victory. We don't know if something else is going to take its place. All we know is that life is fleeting, fragile, and full of change. And these steps will help you prepare yourself so that the next pandemic, the next epidemic, the next worldwide crisis will not disrupt your peace. You'll still be able to sleep well at night and continue doing good for your family and the community.
And if you're listening to this on the podcast, I want to encourage you to go out to my Facebook page. It's facebook.com/JJ Knows the Way. And I encourage you to sign up for our newsletter at buildingwealthtogether.com. As I transition out of the military, I'm going to be more consistent in publishing both to my Facebook, my Instagram, Twitter, and to the newsletter. That's all I have for you guys today. Y'all take care and be blessed.
If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure you subscribe at jjconway.org. Now go walk in abundance and leave a legacy.